Does alcohol cause psychosis? Oddly, this is one of the most discussed topics on some of my recent videos in the comment section and in my DMs. The answer is it's complicated, and I'm going to teach you how to think through it. To canvas this topic, we need to think about three elements of alcohol. First, we need to think about what it does in intoxication. Second, we need to think about what it does in withdrawal. And third, we need to think about how intoxication and withdrawal interact with underlying disorders of mood and thought. Real quick before we get into that, we need to be aware of what alcohol actually is as a bioactive molecule. Its fundamental mechanism of action is that it increases GABAergic tone in the brain. By acting on GABA receptors, it essentially throws on the brakes, the gross effect of which is that it's harder to think. So let's talk about number one, which is what alcohol actually does on a neural circuit level. Low-dose intoxication with alcohol fundamentally causes disinhibition. And that's why people call it a social lubricant, because they feel less inhibited from engaging in social interactions that might make them nervous normally. Essentially, the frontal cortex that would normally inhibit you from doing things is made a bit weaker by the alcohol. So you're likely to see more impulsivity and indiscretion. At higher doses, alcohol becomes a sedative. This is where people are blackout drunk, where they're no longer aware of what's going on, they'll do stuff and have no memory of what happened, or they'll just pass out altogether. And in the extremes, they might have respiratory depression, which can be life-threatening. Now let's get into number two, because when people chronically use high amounts of alcohol, the body builds up a state of tolerance, which at the receptor level means decreased activity of GABA receptors because they've been beaten to death by the alcohol, and relative increase in NMDA receptor activity. In other words, the brakes are weak and the gas is strong. If alcohol then is suddenly withdrawn from that system, you wind up with alcohol withdrawal, which at first can be nausea and discomfort, headaches, feeling gross, though over the course of a couple of days or even shorter, this can evolve into alcoholic hallucinosis, which is where a person can have hallucinations due to alcohol withdrawal, and then delirium tremens, which can be characterized by severe instability of vital signs like blood pressure, heart rate, and temperature, as well as seizures, which can be life-threatening. That's why folks often have to undergo medically supervised withdrawal from alcohol. Lastly, we need to talk about how alcohol interacts with other disorders, which gets to the question of does alcohol cause psychosis, apart from the alcoholic hallucinosis. Clinically, I've definitely seen instances of patterned alcohol use worsening things like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or schizoaffective disorder. These big shifts in neurotransmitter activity can be remarkably destabilizing to these mood states. Moreover, chronic alcohol use is associated with worsened anxiety and depression amongst many other ills. And of course, the disinhibition of alcohol intoxication can mimic some of the features of manic psychosis, which I think is what a lot of the commenters were alluding to. But what are your thoughts on the topic? I look forward to continuing the conversation with you in the comments down below.